Last week, I made a series of videos about Private Government by Elizabeth Anderson, or also known as her 2015 Tanner Lectures. In this week's videos, what I'm going to be doing is offering some criticisms from her critics and presenting her responses to those criticisms. When I do this, I'm not going to be giving a full, comprehensive look at every single thing her critics have said. What I'm going to be doing instead is presenting a dialectic. So my goal is to offer those criticisms that she responds to. So what you can see is sort of a conversation between some intellectuals. So let's get started. The first criticism I'm going to be talking about is it's sort of a line of critique that comes from Anne Hughes and David Bromwich. And what Hughes and Bromwich point out is that life in early modern England was awful for workers. It's just not the case that movement towards a free market ideal made the world a great place for all workers. So, average income did increase throughout the 17th century. It increased remarkably. But the benefits of this were really unevenly distributed. And so what accompanied this increase in average income was a widening gap between the rich and the poor and increasing social polarization. And by the mid-17th century, about the 1750s, 60s, what you had was a whole lot of households who were unable to support themselves financially, as there was not this promised ladder that you could climb if you were poor that would lead to independence and financial success, right? So a lot of households needed to rely on public assistance by the middle of the 17th century. And so in light of these developments, Anne Hughes is really critical of Adam Smith's optimism about the free market, sort of the benefits of a free market society. And here's a quotation from her. So it's from page 83 of Private Government. It is difficult, then, to share Adam Smith's benign judgment on social and economic change in early modern England. There were more losers than winners, and most of the Leveller leaders and many of the cavalry, at least in Parliament's army, were from the more prosperous sections of this divided society, albeit not from its richest elements. Historians use the woolly term, the middling sort. Right? So the idea is that the benefits of the new move towards a market society were really unevenly distributed, and the Levellers themselves came from a privileged class. David Bromwich gives a different perspective that also helps make this point that the movement towards a market society wasn't good for everybody. So what he talks about is the fact that movement towards free trade and open markets can lead to the destruction of traditional ways of life that a lot of people find a lot of value in. So here's a quotation from him about that. This is from page 96. So he says, "For trade uproots lives and turns ancient occupations obsolete. What we lose in the process is the very thing that the new political economy has promised, self-dependent power." So that was page 96 from Private Government. So Bromwich and Hughes offer very convincing arguments against the following claim. They offer arguments against the claim that free markets made everything better until the Industrial Revolution. A movement towards market society made things better for all workers until the Industrial Revolution happened. And if that had been Anderson's claim, she would be in trouble because they would have offered a really good argument against that claim. But luckily for her, that's not her claim. So she does not claim that the movement towards free markets made things better for all workers until the Industrial Revolution happened. And here's a quotation from her about that. "My argument is not that the rise of market society was all good for workers until the Industrial Revolution. It is that the Industrial Revolution decisively undermined the model early egalitarians promoted of how a market society with appropriate reforms could liberate workers." So let's break this down a little bit. So according to Anderson, early egalitarian thinkers did not think that the free market just by itself was going to solve all the problems of workers. What she claims these early egalitarian thinkers believed was the following. Free markets could benefit all workers as long as they're accompanied by really significant reforms. So you need to have anti-corruption reforms. You need to have all sorts of different pro-worker reforms, state-funded education for workers. And in the case of the United States with the Homestead Act, free land. So the importance of the Industrial Revolution is not that it showed that the free market thinking, sort of a movement towards a free market, can lead to harms experienced by workers. The importance of the Industrial Revolution was something very different. It's that we saw that the free market ideal, even when accompanied by reforms, isn't going to be sufficient to protect the most important interests of workers. So why is this the case? Well, this is the case because of economies of scale and other things like that. So due to economies of scale, a free market, even if it's accompanied by reforms of the sort just talked about, is not going to be the world that Adam Smith envisioned. It's not going to be the world characterized by small enterprises and a really easy ladder, not an easy ladder, but like sort of a clear, feasible ladder that you can climb from poverty up to a position where you're self-sustaining and independently employed and financially secure. Due to economies of scale, a free market leads to a world where you have an economy dominated by large corporations and where wage labor is the status quo for most workers for much of their lives. So that was a discussion of one line of critique against Elizabeth Anderson's Tanner lectures and her response to that critique. Thank you very much for watching. In the next couple of videos, I will be exploring more critiques and responses to those critiques. Thank you.